Got your 10-minute intro ready?
Yeah, I guess I better, huh? Hello, and are we on? Does it say I'm on? You don't know.
I'm looking for it. I want to test
File.
my.
Streaming live YouTube. Sustenance cover Enoch. Viewers 0. Okay, so this is good so far. The only problem is me messing around with this thing is going to be, for all posterity. There you go. Hello and welcome to another video from the only channel you need to not only survive the current apocalypse, but actually enjoy it. And today we are live streaming once again. I think this is our third time around at this. We're getting a little bit better every time, so hopefully we'll put on a good show for you today. Got quite a few subjects to discuss. The last time I was on here, I was talking about plans for going to Goodwill, so I can tell you all about that. I've also posted another video in the Bible Code series, and so we can talk about that. And I also offered to discuss Enoch because every month somebody somewhere asks me about the book of Enoch, and I usually just brush them off with some kind comment. But I feel like that's probably not good enough because I know that people, they may be wanting me to make a judgment call on whether or not the book of Enoch is real, and I'm not ready to do that. But at the same time, I think a lot of my subscribers just want to know my basic feelings on it. So we'll go ahead and discuss that. What do you think we ought to talk about today? First off, Alec Toledo.
I don't know. Maybe finish up with your Goodwill visit, but I'm not sure how people really are interested in that.
Well, they might be. I came across a really, really super good deal while I was at Goodwill this week on a shiny new stainless steel military bedpan. And they only wanted like $2 for it. And my regular thing at Goodwill is to walk around and pick up everything I'm interested in, and put it back down and walk off and think about it. I picked that thing up and I said, "Man, at $2, I could take this to the scrap yard and get $4 for it." And I put it back down. A lady was listening to me talk, and she walked over there and picked that thing up, and put it in her buggy as soon as I set it down. And I had already said, "Well, you know what? I'll probably just take this home, and whenever we have company, I'll fill it with ice and put a champagne bottle in there." And she said, "No, I don't think my company would like that, but they might think it's cool to see this hanging on the wall with flowers in it." So anyways, I missed out. That was my only big deal that I could have made while I was there. But I went to another Goodwill, and a man come along behind me, tapped me on the shoulder, and I turned around and he said, "I kind of thought that was you. Your hair is a dead giveaway." And it was a local beekeeper. And so he said, "I've been thinking about calling you. My wife and I are ready to retire, and we're going to move out of state, and there's no way in the world I am going to haul my beehive out of state. So I was wondering if you wanted it." I said, "Yeah, I want it." And he doesn't have one of those kind you go to the store and buy. He's got one of those that looks like a animal's feeding trough beehive. They call them top bar hives, and they're not good for commercial use because you can't put the stuff in a machine and have it spin your honey out. But if you want healthy bees, it's the best. So that's my Goodwill experience. What was the next on the list?
I don't think there was anything else. You want to just go right into the Enoch stuff?
Well, have we got any viewers here? Let's see here. Viewers,
Oh
12
yeah,
viewers.
we got
Anybody
about 12.
anybody asking anything in particular?
No, no, nothing. Nothing too much. David Darush mentions North Korea. Is there anything you can say about North Korea, possibly?
I
I'm
don't
not
watch
sure
too
if
many
that's.
TV shows, so I don't I don't know exactly what's going on in the world. I mean, I know what the
I
big
think
picture is.
they're about to nuke us. I think.
What happened? Oh, they're gonna nuke us. Oh man, I hate when that happens. Okay, next. No, honestly, I mean, I have I've only lived for 50 years on this planet, or 55, but I can look through history and I can see what the empire has done in the past, and so I guess the big one was World War II. I grew up with a bunch of World War II veterans, and so we heard of all the horrible things that the Japanese were going to do to us for like 50 years, and then finally they attacked Pearl Harbor. And so that's the thing, is that we were told for 50 years they were going to attack Pearl Harbor. Well, what was really going on was for 50 years America was, putting economic sanctions against Japan, and they were bombing Japan. I mean, they were flying airplanes over Japan and dropping bombs. I mean, how is that going to work out? What's the results of that? So all of World War II's propaganda that led into Japan bombing America was, just rich people orchestrated. It wasn't real, and I suspect that that's the way it's going right now. I'm not saying that that guy with the weird haircut is a good person or a bad person, but I mean, look, he's a world leader, right? They're not normal. People who want to rule the planet, they're not normal, so they don't do normal things. But at the same time, we have world leaders over here, and they're not normal either. So, you can either follow what they say and worry about all the bad things that are going to happen to us, or just ignore them and get on with your life and hope for the best.
They had an interesting development that they were telling people that nobody can visit North Korea, or no Americans can visit North Korea, like Americans were even going there in the first place. But it's a bit
Yeah, I
of a
know.
new
It's
development.
like they don't have an Eiffel Tower, or or the Louvre, anything like that over there.
Hey, Sable Chicken brings up a point that there's two Enochs. Is that true?
That is true, and that's kind of a part of the problem with me. It's not just two, actually. If you've ever read just the Bible, you'll see that the Bible, like the Book of Genesis, that's not one book. It's very obviously that because here's the way Genesis goes, right? In the beginning, God created the heavens and earth, right? And you go on for maybe two or three chapters, and then suddenly, in the beginning, God created Adam and Eve, or something like that. So it's like there's a completely, it's a story of the creation of the whole world, and then there's suddenly you're back in the garden, and it's the creation of man and woman, and then you get on to some other stories that don't seem to even involve that, and then the next thing there's Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and then it leads up to Noah and Moses. This is a lot of stories over a long period of time, and they're told as if they're separate stories. Well, that's the way Enoch is. The first Enoch is actually it's like 5 books, I think, is what they suspect. 5 books, and even for me, just reading it, it's one of those books I've always kind of avoided even talking about because I don't want to make, like I say, I don't want to make judgment calls on whether it belongs in the Bible or doesn't belong in the Bible. It's not in the Bible, and so if I tell people it does belong, then half my subscribers are going to call me a heretic, and if I say it doesn't belong, then the other half are saying I'm stuck in the box and can't think for myself or something. But honestly, the if you read the books, they're very obviously different books. They're not in any of the traditional languages. So it's not Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. I think they're in. I can't remember the name of it, but it's an Ethiopian language, and it seems to have been an Ethiopian story because if you're reading the Book of Enoch, it starts talking about these really important places, and it's like the Erythraean River, and that's a nation in Ethiopia right now. It's Eritrea, and so it seems to me that the story was produced in that nation, which doesn't preclude it from being in the Bible. It could still be a Bible book, but as far as I'm concerned, the writings of the Buddha could be a Bible book. The Holy Quran, that could be a Bible book. Book of Mormon could be a Bible book, because if you go back in history, we just have to trust, first off, that what we have is accurately translated, because we don't have any of the original writings of any of those books. And then we have to trust that the guys who made the decision as to which books would be included and which books are not included, do we want to trust them? But over the course of time, here's my system that I've developed for determining whether a book is inspired by God, or at least even reasonable, or whether it's maybe demonic, is that every book of religion can be divided in 2 ways, or in one way for sure. It could be from the perspective of the true God, or from the perspective of the God of civilization. That we're talking about Satan, because it's not God in general that talks to man, it's his messengers, and that's what the word angel means, is messengers. So he has righteous angels and there are wicked angels, and they're all called messengers. So when we get these messages that end up being our ancient books of religion, the way I see it is that the angels are not good angels and bad angels, just like human beings are not good human beings and bad human beings. You've got a lot of people, and they're all different. Some are very, very obviously bad in every possible way. Some are good in every possible way. And then you got a whole lot that are in between. And probably that's the deal with the angels because, if you're reading a book, like I've read the Bhagavad Gita, and for years, that just looks so silly to me. The whole thing. I wasn't raised in that culture, so I'm not understanding, what concepts they're trying to get across. But as I started to understand the Bible more, then suddenly I was able to understand the Bhagavad Gita more, and I was able to understand the Quran more, able to understand the Book of Mormon more. But it seems that to me that some things are just very obviously directly from the God of civilization, very bad, not worth looking into. Other things are still will help to lead you to the truth. Now, look, Ala Toledo, you got to keep me on track here because I'll just ramble all day.
Well, yeah, that's true. You will. But Sable Chicken actually, I don't think he was quite asking about the books. He's making a point that with Enoch, there's two lines that Enoch came from. Apparently, he came from a line, or there was one Enoch that came from the line of Cain, and one Enoch that
Oh,
came from
yeah,
the
yeah,
line.
yeah. There are two completely different individuals. It's very confusing. Because these guys are hundreds of years apart, but they still would have been both alive at the same time. If you go back and look at the first Enoch and then the second Enoch, their lives would have crossed at some point. And we're talking about a time when there was like I don't know 1,000 people on the earth. It's not like they wouldn't have known each other. But there's something to that. But um, the book of Enoch, there are two books of Enoch, and then there's 5 books in the one book, and then the second book is probably 5 books. But they actually claim to be from the Enoch that was saved from death, was taken up and saved from death, because it says he's seventh in line according to Jude. And in the book of Enoch, it's not actually written by Enoch. I think it's written by one of his grandkids or by Methuselah. Like Enoch gave the information to Methuselah, Methuselah gave it to his kid, and his kid wrote it down. And see, that would be the good Enoch. That's the Enoch that walked with God. The one that's mentioned in Hebrews chapter 11. That's the Enoch that would have produced the book we're talking about, or both books. They both make that claim.
Well, Sable Chicken is also making the point that there was a bad Enoch that built cities, and then there was the good one that you mentioned that walked with God, and then finally awakened mentioned is kind of similar to like a yin yang 2-dimensional thing.
Very true. Very possible. I mean, that's what the whole Bible is. It's dualism, uh, light and dark, good and evil. But with Enoch, here's the thing. It's like I want to just say yes or no to it because there is the possibility, right? But a lot of it doesn't make sense. It doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that the book itself is doesn't make sense. It's possible that at some point the translation process altered things to some extent. I mean, I've dealt with the Bible for years. I know that a lot of times the English Bible makes no sense. But we have resources we can go to. You can type in on Google the chapter and verse, and it'll take you to the original Hebrew, original Greek, and break each word down and show you every single instance of where that word is used in the Bible. And you can see for yourself if something happened in the translation process, or if perhaps you have to adjust your thinking, or if you just have to say, I'm done. The Bible makes no sense to me. I'm walking away from it. But you'll almost every time you'll see that it's just a really easy, obvious translation problem. One I was thinking about before I even started on this today, when I just started to contemplate whether or not every book in the Bible has to make perfect sense. There's a lot of stuff in the Bible that at one time made no sense to me at all, and now they're my favorite books. But even within those books, like the book of Job, I understand Job perfectly now. It makes perfect, reasonable sense. It has a lot to do with the sign of the Son of Man. It's preparing us for what's going to happen in the future. But at the end of the book of Job, there's a strange line that I've never figured out. It says, then Job, who represented the earth, lived on for 140 more years after Christ returns. And like the earth is not going to stop living after 140 years. That's got to mean something else. Could just be that the man Job, who was the pre-enactor of this event, lived on for 140 years, but the earth itself is going to live on forever. So you can't just reject anything that you can't figure out immediately, because you just turn into one of these YouTube hero atheists, because they do that all the time. They're like, "Oh, you think the Bible is true? Well, what about verse 17? That's silly." Well, maybe to you. It's not silly to me usually. But same
You
thing
know,
with Enoch.
yeah, James Stephen Emery is bringing up. There's always like two archetypes throughout lots of mythology, and he brings up there's two King Arthurs.
Didn't know about two King Arthurs.
I never heard about two King Arthurs either, so that's new to me. Maybe
Well,
it's two versions of
here's
Luke.
a. Oh, when I, when Noah built the ark and the ark came to rest on dry ground, there was an incident. It was a sexual incident where, um, was it Ham, Shem, it was Ham. Yeah, Ham and Japheth got together or not Japheth, Ham and Japheth got together, and they manipulated things, orchestrated a series of events that ended up with Moses or Noah being in bed with Ham's wife, or Ham's female, his tribe. And it seems to me that what was happening was that Ham wanted one of Noah's children to be born in his household, because that would enable him to take possession of the promised land, or the possession of the land is the way it talks. And so when Noah discovered this, he got mad, and he grabbed hold of the only one that didn't participate, which was Shem, and he told him, said, when your kid is old enough, he goes into the household of Shem, because it's Shem that's going into the promised land, and he's going to take your kid with him, because your kid is my kid. That was Canaan, and to this day, that was the land of Canaan. Shem went in. It wasn't called the land of Shem. It was called the land of Canaan, because
And
Canaan.
you said Canaan was Phoenicia, really?
Yeah. Canaan is Phoenicia. We're always told the land of Canaan. We're not told the Phoenicians, because the churches want to kind of keep us confused about what was actually going on there. The Jewish people were supposed to be some tiny little group of people who were powerful because their God led them on to being a powerful nation. But they were in the land of Canaan. Even all of that surrounded them, which was not part of the 12 tribes, was still part of that nation. Those people who lived outside of the 12 tribes, after so many generations, if their men would get circumcised, if they would live according to the laws, if they would actively participate in the sacrifices, they could gain entry into one of those 12 tribes. And that happened all the time. These people were living under tribal law. Every 7 years, they were allowed to break free from the tribe and join another tribe, or start their own tribe. And I don't mean that you would have more than 12 tribes. It's just that within the tribes themselves, like within Judah, there would have been maybe 100 family groups, and each one of them knew where their inheritance was, or where their land was. And you could join one of those even if you were from outside of that, the Jewish culture, as long as you were taking part in all that stuff, and you met the criteria for however many generations, and you were circumcised, or your males were circumcised, you could eventually become a Jew that way.
Alan Marlin says something about Noah being emasculated by Ham's son. I'm not sure what that means.
He was drunk, and he was having, they said it uncovered the nakedness. That's the way it's translated into our English Bibles. But that phrase is used like 2 or 3 times in the Bible, and it's always exposing a sex act. It's not about taking somebody's pants off. It's about an actual sex act. And so when his kids participated in exposing his nakedness, it wasn't like they were like ridiculing him or so. I'm not really sure. I think they just wanted it to be established that Noah had had sex with Ham's wife so that when the child was born, they could lay claim to the promised land. I really believe that. It's not spelled out word for word, but if you look at the tribal laws, it was presented to those people who lived before the Jewish law code. And even when the Jewish law code came along, it was based on that. It's like if you they had a whole list of laws for if you were to have a sex partner and your sex partner had sex with another man, the child would still be yours if your sex partner was in your household. And if you died, then your brother had to have sex with the woman, so she would produce a child within your house, so she could claim your land. Like the woman couldn't claim land, but if she could have a baby by you, then her son could claim the land, and son's going to take care of the mama. That's the way that worked. I mean, that's really in the Bible. I'm not one of them guys that can throw out chapter and verse on weird stuff like that, but it's in there. I think everybody knows it's in there.
Yeah. One Way 1978 brings up Boaz and says he's a Mason. Do you know what that
Who's that?
means?
Boaz?
Yeah, he says Boaz was a Mason.
I don't know. There's a when okay after the ark came to rest on dry ground. Okay, there was Ham, Shem, Japheth were in the ark, and they all left, and they took Canaan with them because Canaan would have actually been a fourth son of Noah, but he was actually a nephew. Oh, and that was the whole thing I was getting at, is that Shem's nephew was Canaan. Well, when Abraham went into the promised land, he brought his nephew, and it was a similar circumstances. Probably the same thing happened to him that happened to Shem hundreds of years earlier. But they had a bunch of kids, and the kids had kids, and so then you get this list of 70 nations and where they came from, which ones descended from Ham, which ones descended from Japheth, and it actually tells you this one was the first one to be a Mason, which probably, yeah, Boaz, is that what you said, Boaz?
Right, right. He says Boaz. I don't know who that. I
That's
don't know who
probably
Boaz.
true. I mean, honestly, if you go back and you trace these lineages, you'll find that a lot of times that you can corroborate this path that was taken by these people. But a lot of times people are called the children of the devil, but not because of their genetics. It's because they're demon possessed, or they worship the demons, or they do the will of the demons, or they're part of that club, which oftentimes follows family line. I mean, if you look at like who's the president now, Donald Trump. So if you go back and trace out who his great 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 grandpappy is, it's like George Washington's uncle or something. Because these guys are all in the same family, and not only that, but they're all descended from King James, the English guy. And King James laid claim to being a direct descendant of Pharaoh.
Hey, so Alan Marlin wants to make a correction. What he meant by emasculated is he said that Noah had his goods removed by Ham's son. I guess
I've
in
read a lot of
retaliation.
these apocryphal books, and there may be some apocryphal book out there that says that, but I've never seen it. It's not in the Bible. The wording. When you get to these things like the story of the Nephilim, the story of the flood, the story of the entry into the Promised Land, most of that patriarch stuff is really confusing. And so I've gone back and I've done the research. I've looked at every word that I can imagine being important to the text in original language, Hebrew, what we call Hebrew, and um, I would have to have a chapter and verse, and then spend a couple
He's
of
saying it's from
hours.
the mid. Saying it's from the
Oh
midrash.
yeah, the midrash. There's a bunch of those. What I just read one of those. It's like, what in the world is that I got up there? Can't see him from here. Oh, the Talmud. I think the Talmud is full of midrashes. That's like a Jewish literature. It's like, okay, here we go. We've got the law, right? Thou shalt not eat a ham sandwich, right? And so these midrashes would come along and explain how pigs are bottom feeders, or pigs are the sons of Satan or something. And so it's like a midrash is a deeper understanding of the law, so that people can understand why we have the law or something like that. But when you get into like the Talmud, I mean, that's one of those things I've read it's just terrible. It's like Proverbs on steroids. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but it's like if you read the whole Bible it's not just good; it's good and bad. You know, a Bible is not a rule book for how to get to heaven. I always say this. It's simply a recorded history, written history of the war between Satan's empire and God's kingdom, right? And so when you read the Bible, it's different from other religious books in that it gives you the choice. You know, other religious books are if you have sex, you will be set on fire while tied to a tree or something. The Bible says, you know, if you're a human, don't have sex with demons. That's bad. But if you have sex with demons, just know that it's going to cause problems. I'm not going to do anything to you, but it's going to cause problems for. And that's the case. Here we have, 1,000-year history of the Nephilim's creation. And the Nephilim are the kings of the earth. They're to this day, the rulers of humanity, those that take the lead and lead man down this path of destruction.
Hey,
And
so going back to that Boaz real quick, Neph Killer, which I guess is Nephilim Killer.
yeah, I've
He,
seen his name up there. He's like a regular
uh,
commenter, subscriber.
yeah, he brings up the Boaz again. He just says that he's glad if Boaz was a Mason, which I can't imagine a Mason being that far back, but if he was a Mason, when Jesus came along, Jesus broke the generational curse of that, apparently. So, I don't know, what generational curse are we talking about?
It's not a honestly, it's like I'm just one man and I can only read like a million words a day, and like the Bible says,
You're not a computer?
yeah, it's like the Bible says to the writing of many. This is the New World Translations version of it, as I have it memorized, best I can remember, is to the writing of many books there is no end, and yet they can be they can wear you out, something like that. Because there's a lot of books out there that if I wish I could read them all and carefully go over them all in their original languages, because a lot of times that's a problem. You get something that's in English and it doesn't even closely relate to what was originally written. But the stories like that end up being like something that's just recently happened. When I say recently, I mean like since the Civil War era, is that a lot of people are realizing that they've been lied to, and so they're going deeper into the Bible. And we have this Hebraic roots movement, which has led to the Messianic Jew movement, uh, and people are kind of interpreting the scriptures along different lines, and sometimes it's for the benefit of knowledge, so you actually learn more. But sometimes, due to the fact that we all have busy lives, we can't check everything we're being told. There's a lot of information out there that's just silly. And so you could spend your whole life going through and trying to figure out which things are which. And I haven't done that. It's like the story of the trees, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and there's the tree of life. And so there's this entire doctrine about those two trees, whereas one is Jesus and one is Satan. And I've looked at it and I'm like, that really, it only lines up for like one or two verses. Then you're completely having to make stuff up to make that work. But there's a lot of stuff out there like that, and I haven't, I haven't researched it enough to sit here and say yes or no to any of it. But as
Well, he
far as
just
the
wants.
Freemasons, would there be Masons back that far back? The Masons movement, you can go back into when the pyramids were built. That's like the earliest thing that comes up in the Bible. Those were builders. And then, they're still called builders today. So the Freemasons have had 100 different names, and there's different levels of them. And, when you talk about Illuminati, who is that? It's just the Freemasons. It's the builders. It's not anything special. It's like the difference between a Catholic and a Baptist. What is it? Different Pope.
Yeah, well, Neff Killer, he says he just wanted to clarify that he didn't believe Boaz was a Mason. But
Oh, okay.
the next comment comes from Simple Sister Living. She's going back to the Nephilim topic, and she wants to know what you think about how the Nephilim survived the flood.
It seems to me, now I say this a lot, and I may not even know what I'm talking about, but it just seems to me, if you go back and you look at the stories of the Nephilim, right? Okay, we only have one little glimpse into that. Was that Genesis chapter 9 verse 4 maybe? It says, in those days, when the gods, the sons of the true gods, saw the daughters of men, that they were very beautiful, they took for them wives, mainly all who they wished, and they produced children by these women, and they became the mighty men of old, those the famous men, the men of renown. Some Bibles say giants. There's really not nothing to support that, but if you look at the Nephilim, you look at that story, you can go to cultures all around there. You know, okay, what is a Nephilim? It's a son of a god, one of the sons of God, reproducing offspring with a human female, and that's like what is Zeus or Cronus, Zeus and Hera, or Jupiter and Hera? Who is I get Roman and Greek mythology mixed up, but they have a kid. His name is Hercules, right? Hercules is half human, half angel or half god, so he's a demigod. Go back into Egyptian mythology, and you've got Isis, Horus, and Osiris, and Horus is a demigod. You know, Isis is a human female, and Osiris is a god. They have a child. It's half and half. He's Horus. Heracles is Roman mythology, right? Isn't that Roman mythology or Greek myth? One of them. But even if you go back like Marduk, Malcolm, Mars, these are all. It's the same story. It's the same story from other cultures. The difference being that these are all the heroes. You know, in Greek mythology, the Nephilim are the heroes, and you know, Roman, Phoenician, Egyptian, Assyrian, all of the heroes are the demigods. In the Bible, the demigods are bad.
You know,
They're
I heard one person say that the way the Nephilim survived the flood was through the wives of Noah's children because they had the genetics in there, and
I knew
so
there was a question I was supposed to be answering. But anyways, the whole thing is that every account of these individuals inside of the Bible, outside of the Bible, it has them eating groceries. You know, they're eating groceries, they're beating people up, they're having sex, they're living in mansions, and then after the flood, we never hear anything about these beings doing that. You know, the angels and all are always spirit creatures. They don't eat, they don't have sex, they don't live in houses. You know, when Jesus was talking to the religious leaders of his day, he called them offspring of vipers. Well, that's a direct reference to the Nephilim. You know, because Satan was called a viper, right? And so Satan and his angels, they would all be the vipers. The religious leaders of Jesus' day were the sons of vipers, and it doesn't seem like it's a fleshly thing. It's not like they got in the ark and they came out reproducing offspring again or anything like that. It's like the flood killed the Nephilim, and then when human beings went into Sheol, right? So human beings died. All of the human beings in the Bible that were killed in the flood went into Sheol. Sheol simply means the place of the dead, the realm of the dead. That's dead humans. But then in the Bible, it also talks about a place where angels go when they die, called Tartarus, the prison of the gods. You know, that's a Greek word. It's in our Greek Bibles. It's a Greek word. It was part of the common Greek language. Tartarus is not unique to God's teachings. It's a word that was used in a lot of ancient Greek texts. It's a prison of the gods. So it's very possible that these Nephilim were not gods and they were not humans, and they had nowhere to go. I mean, I'm just throwing this out there. This is not specifically in the Bible. The people who are demon possessed today are very likely possessed by the spirits of those Nephilim, and that's what a Nephilim would be today. It's just any world leader, be they economic, political, religious leader. So I don't think they came through the flood in the flesh. I think they came through the flood as wicked spirits.
a couple people are commenting about your reference to the Torah and everything, and Alan Martin says that studying the Torah is wearisome, and the more knowledge, the more pain. And then moving on, comments that yes, the studying the Torah is hard if you weren't brought up with it and reared with it. But um, they believe that you must understand Judaism to understand Christianity.
I've never, I wasn't raised with Judaism, but what's a Jewish Bible? It's a Christian Bible with the back half cut off of it. That's all. It's not like it's not like I don't know who Noah is and who Moses is. It's not like I don't understand. And here's a good thing about it. If you really go through and you look at each and every one of their laws, you'll see a lot of things, very deep things that seemingly, a lot of the Messianics think, well, shoot, now I understand, why I can't eat pork or whatever. But they're not understanding the big thing. The lessons that are taught to us, which have to do with the sign of the Son of Man, the amount of time it's going to take from man being cast out of the Garden of Eden to the time that the earth is restored. So the law was important, but it was done away with. It's not like we still have to go by it. I've seen the verses like where Jesus did away with the law, even while he was on earth. Um, I've seen these Hebraic roots movement people say, well, if you look, it says Jesus did away with the law in parentheses because that was added by man. You go back and look, I mean, it's there. The concept is it's that was put there because that's in the original Greek languages. And, we've got, I don't know, several thousand bits and pieces of Bible manuscripts spread out in museums all over the world, and they all agree. It's not like they've ever found one where that part's missing. So, the concept of Jesus doing away with, or the concept of Jesus making all foods clean is a ancient Bible concept. It's not something that was added by the Catholic Church.
Well, Simple Sister Living brings up that reading the Bible as a Christian does not give you the culture and context and idioms of the Jewish part of the Bible. A lot of it gets lost, I guess, unless you study
I've,
Judaism.
yeah, something I've learned. Look at the idioms. Well, it's like the thing that we talked about in the podcast. I think wasn't it the Gentiles? What is a Gentile? Well, the word Gentile is like a congregation of nations. In other words, the Gentile. A Gentile would be a person who belonged to a nation. So if you were French or Spanish or German, you'd be the Gentiles. The Israelites were not the same as those nations. So in context, when you call someone a Gentile, it means of the nations. But the Bible very clearly states that the Jews were God's Gentiles. That's the word that's used. These are God's nation was the Jews. Marduk's nation was the Philistines, or uh, Marduk's nation was the Philistines. All the nations around there were Gentiles of some god. It's just that the Jews at that time were the nation of God. So Gentile doesn't mean people who are not Jews. Gentile just means national group, which included the Jews. The Jews were the Gentiles of God. They're the nation. It's a nation. It's a group of people.
Alan Marlin brings up that which is new is not testament, and that which is testament is not new.
Is
Not
that
sure
a
what that's in reference to, but
is
I
that a
think he was
verse?
just. It sounds like it. Sounds clever though, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
I mean, it doesn't sound like a verse I've heard, but it doesn't sound like common English usage. Saying, it's like I just went to Walmart and picked up some shoestrings, and a lady didn't use that kind of verbiage when she was talking to me. So it's not like that's. I
Yeah.
know, I know. There's like a time lapse between time I talk and somebody responds on their keyboard. So you,
And
I'm,
I'm trying to keep it. I'm trying to keep you in reference. And there was an earlier question going way back, and not sure if they want me to ask it again. But moving on, 04 says in reference to the books of the Bible, and after the first chapter is recorded, there's changes to the power and the ability of God. So they're wondering, is there something's always needed or used to create something? Why would it be recorded like that? Not really sure exactly the full context of that, but
I'm
does that
not,
make sense?
I'm not really sure. hey, look, that's one of my favorite subscribers there, and she and I interact quite a bit on my videos. But I can say this: here's like the general story of the Bible, and it's gonna come out more and more as I get deeper into the Bible Code video series. If you go back into the ancient past, like 6,000 years ago, we don't have a clue of what people did back then because that's before the flood. If we have found anything with writing on it from before the flood, we have no way of knowing. Archaeologists dig up stuff all the time that man made 150,000 years ago. But if you believe that man was here 150,000 years ago, then you probably don't believe in the Bible. But in general, when they date something, it's always within 4,000 years, and I think that's kind of accurate. So from the time of the flood until now, we have kind of a world history of religion. And so if you go back 4,000, 3,000 years ago, all around the world, every culture worshipped the gods. And their gods all had different names. And we're supposed to think that the Incan gods, the Aztec gods, the Roman gods were all different gods. They're the same exact gods each and every time. And it's not just that they're the same exact gods, but the gods that they worshiped had the same exact names as the names they used for the planets. So, in our day, we talk about Mars, the god of war. Well, the god of war, Mars, is named after the planet Mars. And that's the way it always was up until about 2,700 years ago. In about 2,700 years ago, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Elijah, all these people are saying God is changing the months and years, which means he's changing the heavens. So suddenly the moon ain't going to work right no more, the sun ain't going to work right no more, and the planets ain't going to work right no more. And from that moment on, about 2,700 years ago, you have all of these philosophical religions popping up that don't include anything about the planets. If I got this thing on the wall over there, the Tai Chi Chang, that was like about 2,700 years ago, and I think the writings of the Buddha about 2,700 years ago. The Talmud, all the stuff that's in the Talmud started getting put in about 2,700 years ago, um, and you see a complete change earthwide in religions based on a complete change earthwide in the way that the calendar worked or the way our objects in our solar system functioned, and then suddenly, and this isn't just one, two, three, and you're there. There's a lot of changes that happen, and they seem to all go along. This is earthwide. Earthwide, when Moses took the Israelites out of Egypt, they had these plagues, right? Plagues of flies, plagues of frogs. Earthwide, there in other religions, people experienced that. So it wasn't like a localized event. That stuff was happening everywhere. In the Bible, like when I think it was Joshua prayed for an extra day, and so the sun stopped. Well, on the other side of the planet, people talked about God making an extra day of night. So this is real stuff that can be confirmed around the earth. Changes taking place in the positioning of our solar system and such. Even like Sodom and Gomorrah, stories from around the world about the same time of fire and brimstone coming out of the sky. Well, as time went on, I mean, it may seem that God's losing his power or God is not working the same way. And it really isn't so much that, is that God is just changing the way that religion is perceived.
Well,
So
and actually, that's kind of the clarification that they made is that in Genesis, God didn't need anything, but as the farther along you go in the Bible, it's like you need more and more things. Like he needed a rib to create woman from Adam, and now, I mean, is he losing his power? I guess.
well, I don't know if he was losing his power, but if he needed a rib to create Adam, he'd have been in trouble. There wasn't nobody else around. It's like, okay, we got a
Well,
guy. Let's use this as our mold for the next one, so that way they'll be able to, breed. We want to accidentally make the wrong kind of genetics in this other creature and then not be compatible. So let's.
yeah, yeah, but I think the point is that
That he couldn't
why
go
is it?
without the rib later. He needed a rib. Well, I don't know really if that's the case. I think that we think of natural law, or we think of the laws of physics as they're explained by scientists. These are guys with certificates, and in general, they're not that smart. But there really is a laws of physics that maybe we're not aware of, that God puts these things into motion, and from that moment on, it's like it's an automatic. It can't possibly be, but it's at least a little bit more an automatic. I mean, if he takes a day to create 100 trillion species, and then from that moment on, he's not creating anything, that he's just allowing the species to procreate, well, I don't know that that's God doing things or being weakened, but I think there is a process. And not to, I don't want to stick my neck out there and have somebody like take a sound bite out of this and go around the world proving what an idiot I am. But God created in 6 days, right? And then he rested. Now, for humans, what happens at the end of the rest day? Go back to work. 6 more days, you rest. 6 more days, and you rest. So God's not creating here. The creator is not creating here right now. But that doesn't mean he stopped creating. It's like he did 6 days here. He rested a day. He went on to another solar system, Worked on that one for 6 days. Took a day of rest. Went on to another. I mean, the universe, according to science, I'm not a member of the religion of science. But I mean, you can go to Walmart and get a telescope for like $400 to show you all kinds of stuff out there that you can't explain, and the scientists seem to have the ability to explain it. They can show you a star, tell you the name of it, tell you how far away it is. And now they're starting to take pictures of planets around these stars, with these really, really powerful telescopes. So those are called exoplanets, and they have found stars similar to ours that have little dots of shadows crossing their path in a regular cycle, just like our solar system,
Now,
supposedly.
yeah. Now, going to this point about losing power, Joe Mama brings up an interesting point, that in Judaic law, Jesus became the sacrificial lamb, and then do you have any knowledge of the need for goats to be, uh, sacrificed to appease God, and the role of ritualistic sacrifice that God requires to do His power?
These are all things that are recorded in the Jewish law code to teach us much bigger lessons. And I mean, kind of getting off the track here of my Enoch story, but let me just throw this out there. Did I? You're the guy that remembers what I say. I can't remember from day to day anything. But have I told you anything about the bull
Well, we've talked about it about a month ago, but it's
on
good to bring
here,
it.
or did just me and you?
Not on the live stream. Not on the live stream. No, we've talked about it on the podcast. So
Okay, I'm throwing something out here now that's going to make me look goofy or crazy, tinfoil hattish, but it's real. Is that years ago, 1,000 years ago, David decided to go to war with the Philistines. Actually, he was told to go to war, get the Philistines out of the promised land, and he refused. He was scared. And so God said, okay, well, I'll just go ahead and slaughter a bunch of you anyway. And Dave said, no, 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 never mind. We'll do it. We'll do it. And God says, no, no, no. It's too late. I asked you to go do this, and you wouldn't do it because you don't trust me. So now you're going to suffer. And so David says, no, no, no. We're going to take the ark, and we're going to go defeat the Philistines. Well, they went, and they lost the ark. And so in the process, the ark ends up in the middle of somebody else's property. And for whatever reason, the Philistines didn't want it anymore because it was making them all sick. And David didn't want it because when they went to pick it up, one of his friends touched the thing and he died. And David's like, just leave it. Leave it where it is. I don't want it in my kingdom. I don't. And the Philistines don't want it. Just leave it out here. Well, that piece of land was being used to thresh wheat. And so they had these bulls that were attached to this big device that would put these huge rollers to crush the wheat up. And that would break apart the chaff. It would take the straw and tear it up, and it would drop the seeds into this depression in the middle of the thing. It's called a threshing floor. And the name of that threshing floor was Moriah, Mount Moriah. Now this, everybody that's watching this needs to pay attention because this is a big deal. All right? And I've got this thing back here. Maybe I should look, I'm gonna disconnect so I won't be able to hear you. But I'm gonna try to do this because I did put an extension cord on part of this. I'm a little nervous trying new stuff. Okay, I can't hear anybody. Oh! Oh! I hope y'all can see this. Low quality video. in the ancient past, this is like, I'll try to do this. Like the constellation Taurus, we'll just use that as an example because I'm kind of familiar with it. That's supposed to be a bull, right? So that's constellation Taurus. It doesn't really look like that. It looks kind of like some dots. I think it's something like that. Well, anyway, some guy was stuck in China doing some kind of research, and he decided to look into the constellations that the Chinese used in their zodiac, and he noticed that they look very similar to the Chinese alphabet or their Chinese lettering system. So he was talking to a friend that was in Israel, and he said, "Well, wait a second. Now that I think of it, this looks like our alphabet." So that's what the stars would look like. So we've got in constellation Taurus, we've got this and this. That's what constellation Taurus looks, alpha and beta. And the next one, I guess, is gamma and delta, epsilon. See, A, B, C, D, E, and that's our constellations. Well, remember, Taurus is the bull. And so at the very beginning, here's our sun, right? Here's the Earth, and the constellations are like this. Remember, that's A, B, C, going in a circle all the way around. Remember when God said, "I am the Alpha and the Omega" in the book of Revelation? Well, what he was talking about is he's all of the stars, because these stars this is their designations, Alpha, Beta, all the way back till you get to Omega. See, Omega looks kind of like that. And both of them look like bulls, actually. One's upside down bull, one's right side up bull. And that's why there were 24 alphabets, because there's 12 months in the southern hemisphere, 12 months in the northern hemisphere. So you've got January, February, March, April, May. Well, in our winter, southern hemisphere, there's actually, hope this thing is working and y'all can hear me. But anyways, there's 12 months down there too that they're opposite of us. So 12 and 12 is 24. Well, like if this is the sun, you cannot see over here into the ecliptic, but you can see back here. Now, if the Earth and the Moon were in conjunction, what would happen is, as you're on the Earth looking at the Moon, every month the Moon would be in one of these constellations. Now, Taurus is like a southern, it's summer. You see it in the summer. You don't see it in the winter. And so, no, it's Leo. Like you've heard that saying that it's like a lion in the winter. Well, when the lion is in the winter, he's over here. That's Leo. Well, he's the sun, right? And so that's the way all of that stuff works. And oh shoot, let me get back over here. Oh. So let me find my plug. I've got to get a wireless headset so I don't have to go through all this. Oh. Okay, did anybody hear me while I was doing that?
It sounded good. Yeah, it sounded pretty good. Yeah,
so
and the graphics weren't that great, but
if you're watching this on a car phone or cell phone, then yeah, you probably didn't get much out of that. I could have just told you what I was talking about without the pictures.
Hopefully we get something new in the future. Now, maybe we're running out of time, so maybe this is the last question. Neff Killer wants to ask if you can give a brief overview of what Enoch's message to the final generation before the Great Consumption.
The whole thing with this back here, okay, is that over time our solar system has changed. Now, the religion of science says it's changed, and they have their whole explanation, but every religion, every culture on the earth spoke about these changes. There is a small part of the book of Enoch, Enoch 1, very small part of Enoch 1, where it says the sun is always in the daytime sky and the moon is always in the nighttime sky. Well, that's not true. That's not true today. It's not true at all. If you go to Enoch number 2, then you get this goofy story about the movement of the constellations and the movement of the planets and the movement of the sun and the moon that doesn't match anything from the ancient past. It doesn't match our day. You know, they had like a 364-day year. It looks to me, this is my take on it, that the Enoch that exists, and this is all of the Enochs that exist, one little piece may be from before the flood. The rest of it is some creation, much later date, maybe right. The oldest copies we have are like 400 BC, maybe 400 BC. But all of the Enoch seem to have been created after the destruction of our solar system, or after the confusion of the solar system. So the message of Enoch, the little bit that I think is real, matches the message of the Bible. It talks about the last days. You would see all of these same things in the sky happening, and that when Jesus said you will see signs in sun and moon and stars, he gave very specific examples in some of his parables. You know, the thing we just did about the 10 virgins, the 5 wise virgins and the 5 foolish virgins, that was a story about our solar system. This stuff back here, you know, like in Enoch, he says, and this is in the oldest Enoch, so it's really obvious that it's a later creation. It says that each of the gods or each of the angels would enter through a different gate, and it has 12 gates. Those 12 gates are the 12 constellations, and later it calls them the 12 animals. And then in parentheses next to that, whether it's an addition or whatever, it says zodiac animals. So the way he described the solar system is not accurate in a 360-day calendar, and it's not accurate in our calendar, but it still exists today in a religious Jewish calendar. And so there is really, most of the book of Enoch is support for religion and religious rituals and religious foolishness, but a little bitty piece of Enoch seems to be from some ancient tradition, and that's the part where Jude was quoting. Because remember, you know, Jude says that he quoted directly from Enoch, but he, you know, if you think that the book of Enoch is 5 or 6 more books that are just stuck together, then that doesn't mean that all 6 of those books existed prior to, you know, from the ancient past. And not only that, but we've got catalogs of all of the different books that were accepted by the Jewish people that go way back. And Enoch is not in any of those catalogs, and yet nearly every book that's in our Old Testament is in those catalogs.
Hey, so yeah, just one last question. Sleepy Girl 85 brings up she was told God's days and the days of the ancient man was longer than our definition of days, and we're still in God's day of rest. And then Joe Mama points out, how do we know that we're not still in the 7th day, the quote-unquote 7th day, where he's still resting?
Well, you know, there's a scripture that says that a day for God is 1,000 years is like a day for God. That's in there for a reason. And so we have this 6-day cycle. Well, if you think that a day is 1,000 years, we're right at like 5,985 years. I mean, really, that's about where it would be, no matter how you count it. If you go back and you say, oh, you know, beget, and add up how old they were when they beget, and it brings us to our time. I think I figured it up once before that the end of the world would have to come sometime between 1969 and 2035. And so, obviously, it didn't come in 1969 or 1970 or any of the years up until today. But we're in there. We're in that little area. If we take 1,000 years for a day, we're in the 6th day, and the 7th day is about to start. That 7th day of rest is obviously yet future, because I'm not resting. You know, I'm on Social Security disability. I'm about as close to rest as you can get, and it's horrible. You know, I'm looking for something a little better than this.
I agree. Now, I guess that's it. We're up at the hour. Do you wanna leave everybody with something about Enoch or some
You know what? I had this.
wisdom?
I wish y'all could see it. Yeah, y'all can see a little bit. Probably can't see nothing. But anyways, there's a lot of stuff in Enoch that doesn't match the rest of the Bible, which is okay because Revelation obviously doesn't match the rest of the Bible. Not much of it anyway. But the book of John doesn't match Matthew, Mark, and Luke. There's a lot of stuff in the Bible that doesn't match. It's not absolutely essential that every book in the Bible match in order to be a Bible book. But some of the things that just don't sound right to me. Okay, this is supposed to be Enoch, right? Recorded by Methuselah, his son, or recorded by his grandson. Now, these people all died in the flood, and there's phrases in Enoch that are even in the old part where it says, uh, the words of a foolish man are like rain in the desert. Now, where would Methuselah learn about rain? The very first time he saw rain, he died. You know, he died before the flood, and it says in the Bible very clearly that there was no rain before the flood. So I'm not trying to pick Enoch apart. I'm just saying that there are some very serious problems with it. Um, yeah, it says that wisdom is like rain in the desert. But it does say things that are backed up by the Bible that a lot of people don't understand or don't know. It says the 7 stars that you see, that's in the book of Enoch, are 7 angels. Well, that's comes up quite a bit in the Bible, and yet no one's ever willing to talk about that. Oh, and it talks about the earth being a threshing floor. That's the point I was trying to make with that. The Alpha and the Beth, or the bull. That sun and the earth and the moon, the bull is constantly going around the earth. The threshing floor at Mount Moriah was purchased from the man that owned it by David. That's where they built the temple. The entire floor of the temple is an astrological chart. Where the Ark of the Covenant sat would have been in the middle of the threshing floor. And there's a whole bunch of scriptures in the Bible like, do not muzzle a threshing bull. In other words, that bull going round and round the earth was represented by the bull that were going around the threshing floor. And what happened on the threshing floor? Bulls were being sacrificed. So the bulls are doing the work while other bulls are having their throats cut and killed. It was a lesson for us. It's not something that makes God happy. That stuff makes Satan happy. God simply left that in the law of the Jews so that people would understand what's happening at this time. We, humanity, are being worked to death by the demons to kill our own selves in making our own food. You know, and while we're threshing, we're not eating the wheat. We're bulls, right? Bulls are eating the straw, the throwaway. So God knows about our situation. He understands. He understands we're in this mess, and He's made a promise of getting us out of it.
Well, that's pretty good then. So that's it. So you want to go ahead and take us out?
As always, look, I hope everybody got something out of this because I have not got a script here. It's a big subject. I know sometime in the future I'm going to have to make something, a little bit better version of this. And it will come eventually if I live long enough and internet don't go down. But as always, I hope you enjoyed it. And as always, if you don't want to survive, don't listen to me. I'm trying to figure out where the stop button is on this again.
Just pull the power out of the computer.
Yeah, just unplug this thing. It's a desktop. It ain't got no batteries. Okay. Are you sure you want to log out?